Professor Mood, you are an expert on political extremism. Please let us know your opinion about results of Greek elections and especially on Golden Dawn rise.
Well, I must admit that I actually thought that it was a hype in the Western media when I first heard about it. And I could simply not imagine that an openly neo-Nazi party could make it into a national parliament. So I was definitely surprised. I think it is the first time in post-war history that a neo-Nazi party makes it into a national parliament, and that a party that essentially is anti-democratic rather than anti-liberal democratic, as most radical right parties are, um, has such success. And I think it does speak to the exceptional situation in Greece, as well to a certain extent to a political culture in Greece, that a party that is linked so clearly to violence as well as to anti-democratic ideology could gain 7% of the vote.
Has it happened to any other European country?
No. One could kind of claim that the Italian social movement, the MSI, in the early 50s, 60s was truly neo-fascist. But
it was 50 years ago.
It was 50 years ago, and the party, at least since the late 70s, was not linked to violence. And even its neo-fascism seemed to be almost symbolic. I think the party today that comes closest to Golden Dawn would be Jobbik in Hungary, which has a little bit more democratic front, but has links to a paramilitary unit called Hungarian Guard, which makes it kind of at the boundary of radical and extreme right.
Does it show a permanent trend? Are you afraid that such phenomena will appear in other European countries as well?
No, I'm not. I think extreme. I don't only think. Based on the history and if you look at studies, by and large, there's one golden rule: if you are not pro-democratic in the sense of supporting popular sovereignty and majority rule, you do not gain any electoral results. Not on the right or on the left, although there are some extreme left parties that have some success. I think Golden Dawn stands out in many ways. I don't see any parties wanting to work with it. I don't see many parties that are similar to it that go beyond a kind of a cult status.
So, as you know, we are having after 1 month elections in Greece. You are thinking that electoral results for Golden Dawn will not be that successful.
Yeah. Now I must warn you that I'm almost always wrong with my predictions, but I do think that Golden Dawn is probably going to make the 3% cut. But I think they will have less than 7% for two reasons. I imagine that the turnout is going to be higher and different. I think particularly a lot of people are in the center who have abstained from the last elections will actually vote now. I also think that part of the electorate of Golden Dawn is not going to vote or is going to be really shocked by finding out more about what Golden Dawn is. And even if they are xenophobic, they will probably use another party as a vehicle for their protest vote, like Laos.
But apart from Golden Dawn, we are having two other populist, not extremist, but populist radical right parties in Greece, independent Greeks, which were very successful, and Laos, which did not pass the limit of 3%. Do you have any working hypothesis about that?
Well, I think Laos was clearly punished for working with the government of the New Democracy and PASOK, and more importantly for then quite large splitting over the bailout. And so I guess that is just a logical consequence of voters being unsatisfied with the product. not so much with what Laos offers in terms of ideology. I think there's still broad support for that, but more they see Laos as being kind of a mess, and that's why they kind of punish them. I would not be surprised if they make it over 3% this time, picking up some people from Golden Dawn and some others. The independent Greeks is more difficult for me. Um, from what I have read, they don't necessarily compete with Golden Dawn and Laos in the sense that I think they speak more to a traditionally conservative and kind of chauvinist electorate, which is disappointed with the way New Democracy has handled the economy and particularly the relationship with the EU. So I see independent Greeks a little bit as a kind of a Eurosceptic conservative party, as one of the fractions would be within the Conservative Party in the UK. Without saying that it's the same ideology, I just think that they attract a similar type of electorate, which would be better educated, more established, yet unhappy with the established Conservative Party.
By coincidence, very close to the results of Greek elections with a neo-nationalist radical right party, you have given a speech provocative 30 years of populist radical right in Europe, so what? It seems from the title that you don't consider populist radical right a serious player at the European political game. Is it so?
Yeah, I mean, I think my speech has to be seen in the light of most of the fairly alarmist media and academic accounts. When you read media in Western Europe in particular, as well as many of the academic accounts on radical right parties or politics, it is kind of assumed as if they are the real engine of West European politics today, and as if they make the agenda, and it is all because of them that we're talking about crime, corruption, immigration, and all those kind of things. And my argument is that if you purely look at the situation and compare countries with strong radical right parties with those with weak radical right parties, you don't see particularly relevant differences. And so I think that radical right parties haven't created these issues and haven't created these policies. More social changes like mass immigration, like the European Union, like a different type of media, have changed attitudes in society, which have at times been amplified by radical right parties and have led mainstream parties to respond to that. So I don't say that they're completely irrelevant, but what I say is that they have pushed mostly right-wing parties a little bit further, but the initial push to go further to the right on immigration or crime came from the right-wing parties and at times left-wing parties themselves.
On the contrary, you are considering as a serious problem in Europe populism, which at one of your articles you have mentioned that it is the new zeitgeist. Can you tell us a little bit more about populism?
Well, I see populism as an ideology which divides society into two homogeneous but antagonistic groups. So on the one hand, you have the pure people, which are considered to be one. And on the other hand, you have the corrupt elite, which also are considered to be one and non-divided. And they see politics as a struggle between those, in which they think that it should follow what they consider the general will of the people. And so what is classic of populism is that you consider the whole elite as being one, whether they're conservative or social democratic or liberal democratic. You say, well, they're all in it together because they're all corrupt.
It's a kind of imaginary community in the way that chauvinists are thinking about the nation.
Yes, But the difference is that for a populist, what connects all the people is morals. So they define the people not in first instance in ethnic terms, but in moral terms. And so they see that the people are all good. They also believe that you can come up with policies that are good for everyone. And that is simply not true. I mean, most politics has winners or losers, or at the very least, some people win more than other people. Yet populists act as if it's possible to come up with policies where everyone profits equally.
And you have written at one of your articles that populism is a centered ideology which is waiting for the content, which might be left, might be right. Is it so?
Yes, I mean, populism in itself doesn't really say much about many issues, most importantly, socioeconomic issues. Right? So populism can be combined with both a left-wing ideology like socialism or a right-wing ideology as even neoliberalism or nationalism. The thing is that there are socialist parties today that use populism like in Greece at the moment, but you also have socialist parties that do not use it. Now, one of the things that is remarkable in the West European context, which for a long time has been fairly elitist about democracy, particularly in the North, people always believed that we should elect the smartest leaders. You didn't want to be governed by your neighbor, you wanted to be governed by someone who was a specialist. Today, almost all parties are acting as if they are just the voice of the people, as if they are the regular guy. And that is what
The
I
echo
refer
of the
to.
voice, the echo of the voice of the people.
Exactly. And that's what I call the populist zeitgeist. I don't mean that all the parties today have become populist. What I mean is that all parties today, by and large, refer in one way or another to some kind of positive, homogeneous people and claim to be able to implement policies that profit all and harm no one.
One of your conclusions is that populism in Europe is mainly right wing, and on the contrary, in Latin America is left wing. In this context, how do you explain that in Greece it seems that we are having populism which is simultaneously left and right?
Well, Greece is actually in many ways one of the outliers because PASOK was from the outset a populist party and a left-wing populist party. And even at a time that left-wing populism was almost unheard of in the rest of Western Europe. So I think it's partly also a national tradition. But I think one of the things that we found or hypothesized was that probably left-wing populism is more prevalent in countries where there is a huge divide between the rich and the poor, and where the poor are actually really poor. And whereas in countries where the welfare state functions pretty well and where the differences between rich and poor are not that prevalent, populism attaches more to social cultural issues like immigration and nationalism.
Are populist parties a threat for liberal democracies?
Yes, they are a threat to liberal democracy because liberal democracy is based on not just popular sovereignty and majority rule, but also a procedural interpretation of democracy, as well as the constitutional protection of minority rights. And populism essentially is a monist ideology, which doesn't see minorities within the people. Like the people for them is one homogeneous group. And so they're very skeptical and actually distrustful of minorities and do not want majority rule to be constrained by anything, not even constitutionally protected minority rules.
So, from that aspect, there is a fundamental tension between the principles of populism and the principles of liberal democracies.
Yes, absolutely there are. And in politics, you do see that mostly in the rhetoric, but sometimes also in the implemented policies, or at least in the proposed policies. One of the most powerful populists ever in Western Europe was Silvio Berlusconi, the former 3 times Prime Minister of Italy. And he would respond to accusations from judges by saying, "Who elected you? Like, I'm the voice of the Italian people." There, and by and large, kind of arguing that because he was elected by a majority of the people, he could do whatever he wanted to because he was the voice of the majority. And the rules didn't apply to him because if the majority of the people would support something, they should get it.
Yes, but if populism will be combined with anti-democratic ideologies such as Marxist-Leninism or Stalinism, it might be an additional problem from to become prophets of a new social regime.
Yeah, there is always kind of a tension though between particularly Marxism, Leninism, and populism, because Leninism itself was very elitist and thought about that it would be an avant-garde, which is by definition an elite that would bring the proletariat to its kind of socialist state. But you do see in the Greek example, but also in some other parties like Die Linke in Germany, that socialist parties are applying populism, at least in their discourse. And I personally think that these are different threats. Like where populism is a threat to liberal democracy, I think true socialism, so not social democracy, but true socialism and particularly Stalinism, is a threat to the democratic part, so to the popular sovereignty and the majority rule.
So that combination does not make you happy at all.
No, it doesn't. And to be fair, I think to virtually any country in Western Europe or Europe as a whole, that combination is both rare and very unsuccessful. Greece is in this respect definitely among the exceptions.
Thank you very much for this very interesting conversation.
Thank you very much.